Hello everyone, this is Mary Margaret, and today we're going to be talking about some books that I think are great choices for this difficult time in the world right now, for a lot of different reasons. They're going to be kind of very random recommendations because everyone has different tastes and needs during this time, and I find that I have different tastes and needs based on the day. So these are some of my favorite books, and hopefully they will be some good ideas or references for you to look at in future. So the first book I'm going to talk about is actually by one of my favorite authors, which is kind of a lot to say because I've actually only read two of her books, and that's because I'm saving them for later. You will find with a lot of authors, if they become a favorite of mine, I like to save their work so I can read it later on instead of just plowing through all of them. So this is my personal favorite by this author, which is probably a little bit controversial. A lot of people prefer another of her works, but you will see that this is one of my favorites because it's a very old, very beaten up copy. So it is Daphne DuMaurier's book, Jamaica Inn. This is a very bizarre cover because this actually takes place when women weren't really wearing makeup very much, and yet the woman on the cover is definitely wearing a lot of makeup. Nothing wrong with that, just not very historically accurate. And this one is very old. And even though the cover doesn't really fit the actual content of the book, I still love it because this is the copy I read when I read this in high school. So the story of Jamaica Inn is really quite a fascinating one, and if you're a fan of Bronte books, any of the Brontes, Emily, Anne, or Charlotte, I think you will enjoy this because the setting is very dark, very atmospheric, and it is on the moors. And really what the story is about is Mary Yellen, who is the main character of this book, when her mother dies and she has to move in with her aunt and uncle, and a lot of mysterious occurrences take place at the Jamaica Inn that they run, and she has to work basically at the bar at nighttime and serve as kind of a waitress, a barmaid. And essentially what happens is she notices that something is really not right about Jamaica Inn, but I love this one because there's so many twists and turns, and the atmosphere, as I said, is fantastic. And I love that Mary Yellen is such a really kind of bold heroine in this book, and I think that if you have read Rebecca, you will know the main character in that. Nothing against her, not everyone can be that kind of bold personality, but she's definitely not like that. She's definitely the opposite, and I think that's part of the reason I found Mary Yellen to be so kind of an uplifting thing to read after reading Rebecca. I found it very refreshing, and I think that if you are into that sort of kind of suspenseful dark book, this is actually a perfect choice for that. And it does have a bit of a love story to it, but I like that it's kind of more on the back burner in the story. I think it's a nice slow burn story, and yeah, very interesting. I'm a fan. I want to reread this one soon. It's been a while, but would highly recommend. The next one I wanted to recommend is actually the first book in a series, which is a mystery series that I, again, am pacing myself through so I can enjoy it. And this is one that's much more of a light read, even though it is actually a murder mystery. And if you have read these, you will know what I mean, but I am on book 4 of this series, and this one is the very first one. So I can tell you it continues to be quite fun to read. So it is The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie. This is by Alan Bradley. This tells the story of I believe at this point, she's 12 years old? She's like 10 to 12 years old, I think. Flavia de Luce, and Flavia de Luce is essentially kind of obsessed with chemistry, and she wants to be one of these great chemists that she studies in her books, and she kind of practices all of these different experiments in her sanctum sanctorum, as she calls it. And she's just hilarious. I think the only thing I would say is to prepare yourself. She's quite full of herself. She has a bit of a big head, but it's kind of refreshing to see that. And I think at that age, a lot of us have that. And so I think it's really fun to read because even though it is a murder mystery, it's very light, and it does touch on some really deep and important topics, especially family dynamics, but it's not depressing. I think the sort of conversation that you will hear Flavia having with herself is quite entertaining, and as a main character, she's just hilarious. So I think this is a really fun series to get started with, especially if you love mystery, but even if you don't, because there's a lot more to it than just the mystery. So would highly recommend this. Super fun. I'm going to continue reading that series this year for sure. I'm just noticing now that each one of the books I'm recommending right now is green, which is kind of funny. So the next book I am actually halfway through, and technically, at least in the United States, that is the case. But in the United Kingdom, where these were originally printed, I've actually read the first book and I'm on the second book. So, you know, however you want to look at it. But in the United States, this is called All Creatures Great and Small, and this is by James Herriot. Now, I love these stories, and I love the TV show that was made for it. So good, so funny, so light. And these are essentially stories for those of you who haven't heard of them. The stories contained in here are essentially of this vet, who is James Herriot, and his kind of early adventures as a veterinarian. And he is essentially going to Northern England after he finishes his studies in, I think, Glasgow in Scotland, and he is practicing as a veterinarian for the very first time professionally, kind of on his own, but with some sort of supervision as well. And so he goes to a house where there is a veterinarian who essentially hires him as an assistant, and he is kind of learning the ways of this area in Northern England as he continues to practice as a veterinarian, but in a professional sort of atmosphere. I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I'm kind of talking in circles, but hopefully it makes sense. But I think this is a really light and quite hilarious story. You're getting kind of this really interesting look into the countryside during this time period. So one of my favorite parts about this book is that it has this really homey feel to it, and I also love that it takes place in England. As I've said before, I love British literature, and I love the time period that this is set in, which I believe is the 1930s if I remember correctly. And I also really just love the kind of feel to the conversations, and it's just kind of hilarious. So I'm looking forward to digging back into this. I've got my little Lupin bookmark here, so I'm gonna try to finish this one soon. It's on my 2020 TBR, so hopefully I'll finish this, and I would highly recommend. Super cozy, super funny, and just very entertaining, so really good. So another one of the recommendations I have for you is actually an entire series, and this one was actually a series that I read as a child. I really wish I had included it in my booktube newbie tag. You guys know I talked about the Narnia books. And this series was hugely influential to me. I just sped through them. I read them so quickly. I loved them. I loved the characters. If you like Narnia, if you like The Lord of the Rings, you simply must check out this series. So this is by one of my favorite authors from childhood and still to this day, Lloyd Alexander. So I have my box set here. These are the Dayne Chronicles. So the first one you have is the Book of Three, and then you have the Black Cauldron, the Castle of Lear, or Lyre, I've heard both, and Terran Wanderer, and the High King. So easy to read. I actually prefer the older editions from when they were originally published, but you know, I wanted to reread the books a few years ago, and I was like, well, I just want to have all of them so I can just read them when I want to, and I would highly recommend these. So essentially, they apparently were based on some ideas from Welsh mythology, and I just find that absolutely fascinating. And I love the story. You will definitely find some similarities to The Lord of the Rings, as I said, and the Narnia books, particularly The Lord of the Rings, but I think they're definitely different enough to be worth reading. I love the main character, Terran, and I love Eilonwy. I adore her. She's so fun. And then you have some really fun side characters as well. I really don't want to say too much more because I don't want to give away any of the plot. But essentially, as I said, you know, if you're not familiar with Narnia or The Lord of the Rings, these are fantasy books which take place in Prydain. That's why they're called the Dayne Chronicles. And they are just so magical and so fun. It has all of these sort of ideas of destiny and making the right choices and becoming who you are supposed to be and growing up and all of those things. And I think that the story is just phenomenal. And I actually am hoping to reread from the Castle of Lear onwards the rest of this year. Just love these books. They're so fun. Please pick them up if you haven't. And if you have questions about them, let me know in the comments, but as I said, I hate to say too much more because it's a spoiler. I feel like it's better to go in not knowing too much. So one of the other series that is one of my absolute favorites of all time, and I'm going to make like a whole movie, or not a whole movie, a whole video about this series because this author and this series are just, I love them so much. So one of my favorite authors and just people of all time is Dorothy Sayers. I'm going to save that for another video because it's a very long story, but she's incredible, and the series that I love her best for probably would be the Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series. And you could really start with any of the books, although I would personally say this is the best place to start. So this is the book called Strong Poison. It's a mystery series. Hopefully you're noticing I love mysteries. And Strong Poison, this is kind of the creepy cover here. Strong Poison is one of those stories which has probably, in my opinion anyway, one of the best mysteries I have ever encountered, which is saying something because I avidly read and watch a lot of mysteries, and so it's kind of hard to fool me at this point. But this is just such a genius mystery, and one of my favorite aspects about it is that this is where Lord Peter Wimsey, one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, meets Herriot Vane, and things unfold from there. So Herriot Vane is actually an author herself. She writes murder mysteries, and she gets accused of murdering her boyfriend in this book. And so what happens is Lord Peter Wimsey decides he's going to take on the case and solve who did it because he thinks she's innocent. And it kind of goes on from there. Cannot recommend this highly enough. It's pretty short, so you can actually read it quite quickly, and I just love it so much. If you like kind of dark academia too, I feel like this is something you would enjoy because it has those aspects to it that are very famous with dark academia kind of vibes. And I think it's also really fun to read just because it's the 1920s and you get a lot of courtroom drama, which I enjoy, but not too much. And then you get also the investigation and then the kind of growing relationship sort of between Lord Peter Wimsey and Herriot Vane. And so I would highly recommend this. I have read it twice, want to read it again. Love this series so much. So good. Another author I would recommend to pretty much everybody because I adore her so much is Mary Stewart. And the book I chose to recommend for this video to kind of escape reality is 9 Coaches Waiting. Even though this one is not my favorite of her books, a lot of people absolutely love this. And the story is very reminiscent of those you might find in Daphne DuMaurier or in perhaps even one of the Bronte sisters. Hopefully you're also noticing a theme here. So 9 Coaches Waiting is essentially a story where we have this young woman who is going to be a governess in a French chateau for the Valmy family. I believe it was the Valmy family. I might be forgetting. This is such an old copy. It does not have on the back. I actually have multiple copies of several of these. Yes, Chateau Valmy in the Haute-Savoie. And this is just so much fun to read. It's got that kind of dark feeling to it, but it's also not depressing. And we essentially find out that once the governess gets to this Chateau Valmy, that she actually has a history in France, even though she's pretending she doesn't understand French. And then she starts finding out that there's a lot of kind of intrigue and family secrets in this place. And then she also meets the mysterious Raoul de Valmy. And then you kind of find out all of these sort of family secrets as you continue through this one. I just love the setting. It's in France, as I've said, I love France, and I think this is a really good one also for escape because it's just kind of one of those which takes you away from where you are, and it's engrossing, super suspenseful, super fun. Would highly recommend. Anything by Mary Stewart really, but this one in particular I think is a really good place to start, and I think it's just a really great one. So just love Mary Stewart so much. So good. So that's it for my recommendations for today. I do want to give you more recommendations, but I know the video's probably gotten way too long already, so I'm going to go on and finish up with that last book, and hopefully you find something that sounds interesting to you in this video. I would love to talk to you about these more in the comments if you would like, and I will list all of these in the description box below so you can check them out if you would like to. And I am looking forward to giving you more recommendations in another video, but I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!